This is a Heart and Hand production.
Hello all, welcome back to a new season of the Rangers Prism, and this kind of feeling, Adam, comes around far earlier every season now. Just complete desolation and a smouldering ruins of expectations by the middle of August. We've got a lot to recap on then, friend. How are we?
Good, thank you. Yeah, what were we? Halloween under Van Bronckhorst, September weekend under Beale, Clement a little bit longer than that. Russell Martin was end of August, and now what are we? School's going back, and it's going tits up. That's so I'm going. It'll be terrible by the 1st of June next year. I don't know how possibly how that can be possible, but we'll manage it somehow.
We will. We'll talk about some of the bigger picture stuff in a minute. Can we just look at this? I guess the specifics of the summer and this start. Cards on the table. I don't think I've been shy on this. Not overly enthused with the direction the club chose to go this summer. However, I did expect quite quickly some good organisation and being kind of well set up, tough to beat, maybe a bit blunt, and I have huge concerns about how Shankland can fit into a Rangers team. And I could see us having a decent start, not setting the heather alight, but some real structure, some real organisation, but that would probably run out of steam. We're still talking about the same kind of flatness issues that we always encounter eventually. I mean, this is worse than this time last year, Adam, because at least even with Martyn and his arrogance and naivety around defensive setup and just how to deal with Scottish football, we could attack, and Panathinaikos and Pilsen, there were at least examples and moments of being able to cohesively. We scored the same goal a few times, for example, in open play. There's just so little to hang your hat on here at all. It is wild how bad this has been.
Yeah, and I guess on a personal level, as in the two managers, if the overwhelming majority of the support didn't want Russell Martin last year and it went really badly, then there's a little bit of Schadenfreude or comfort there in the sense that be fine. Once we get somebody in that I do like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Overwhelming majority this year have got someone in that they do like. The reaction in terms of the manager, I think from the overwhelming majority is night and day compared to last year, but I appreciate that's a personality thing for sure. I've sort of thought myself privately, Russell Martin last year, maybe the approach last year in terms of wanting to be a certain type of club is the right approach. It's something that I want. Execution of it, and the man to do it was way off, as was recruitment. This year, not exactly what I would pick if you held a gun to my head in terms of style of play, all that sort of stuff. But if we hired the right man and gave him the players to enact that, then okay. Not happened, I think is safe to say so far. And I do think it doesn't really matter who the manager is, if I'm being honest. I know that does seem a little bit defeatist and we're sort of removing any agency from the manager, but I think I've just been worn down by the last 5 years, the last 15 years probably, and in reality, until Rangers come up with a plan and enact that plan, and not just the plan is to hire this manager and then sign lots of players and see what will happen. It needs to be a detailed plan. Here's what we want to do. We've spoken about how the fans don't have any patience for 3-year plans, 5-year plans, how it's unrealistic. There's no patience for just ripping it up every summer either, and bringing in 28 players, 29 players, is it, since last summer that have come in. How many of them are still here, first of all, and how many of them are actually good enough to play in Gerrard's team, for example? Rangers' problem has never been spending money. Rangers' problem has been throwing money about with no reason, with no plan. So there needs to be a plan. It is easy to look at Gerrard and say, oh, X, Y, Z. Year 1 was decent. Year 2 built on it. and collapsed. Year 3, okay, things may have happened that were out with our control and blah, 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 blah. But there's progression there. The issue is we're now 5 years further down the line. Patience has worn thin. I believe we have a ownership that seems to listen to us a lot, which is great, but also I wouldn't really listen to me about how to run a £100 million company. So ultimately, I think something you've said before, you have to have a non-football guy employing a football guy to make things work. We haven't done it. And I think we're really bad for trying something half-arsed, and then when it doesn't work, just going in the opposite direction and trying something else. Where if someone just sat down and said, what do we need to do? What are other clubs our size doing? What are other clubs that have the same resources, the same restrictions? What are they doing? And how can we integrate the best bits of that with our culture? I think that would be great. Instead, we just veer from side to side and veer from playing style to playing style, or director of football to technical director, performance director, and not really have a sort of clear plan. And I think that is much more of a problem to me personally than who the manager is.
I would agree. There's so many things I need to unpick or unpack and pick through. I agree. Ultimately, it's the players. Ultimately, it's key players for the bigger picture. But Rangers had enough to be in the Europa League, or still in that situation. They had enough to get past the task that was put in front of them. They should have had enough to have at least 4 points on the board. And McInnes, who, again, maybe not to my taste how he does it, but he's been very clear about what he's wanted to do in previous kind of jobs. Again, we're all experts in body language and what people say, and I know you hate that, but I thought he's seemed since the start of the season, not his unveiling, but I felt he felt quite comfortable, direct,
Yep.
but comfortable in what he wanted. Kind of, oh fuck, this is a lot bigger than anything I've ever experienced. Even as a player, it bears no relation to the pressure that he's under. Clearly hasn't got some of the players he's in. Clearly, some of the players we've brought in have been very much to do with him. I mean, that's just ridiculous to state otherwise. And even last night, as an example, the first half wasn't pulling up trees, but it was fine, and we were ahead in the game, not in the tie, but it's at home. And he rips up what seems to be working. He just seems like a guy who just is just being blown around by the winds of this job in the club, like some of the other people that you've mentioned over the last few years. But even just those few weeks in microcosm, Adam, I'm stunned by some of the decisions that he's taking, because it's just not what I expected. Maybe that was me.
No, I agree. It's why I've railed so much against this knows the league, gets it thing, because there is a monumental body of evidence of Rangers fans who have been players, coaches, whatever, coming in over the last 10 years, and it's not made any difference. It has not made any difference at all. There is no magic wand here. And McInnes and Lawrence Shankland are the two that people have spoken about for so long with that. And as we've said, it doesn't really matter if you've done well in this league, because playing for one of the other clubs and then playing for Rangers and Celtic, there's no comparison. There's nothing there. Derek McInnes spoke about having 74% possession in the game against Hibs. That is a huge, huge change from what Derek McInnes has been used to. So you're asking someone who has 800 games worth of experience at not doing that to come in and after 3 or 4 games be an expert at doing it. I just don't get that. That's my red lines. I was for the Derek McInnes appointment for some of the reasons that you thought. I thought, okay, fine. Defending is different at a club like Kilmarnock or Hearts than it is at Rangers. Of course it is, but the fundamentals I think would probably still be the same, or you can apply the fundamentals there in terms of being tight, being compact, shape off the ball, all that sort of stuff. So I hope that would be the case. And then as we got through the window, we would add quality in the forward areas that would maybe negate the manager's experience or lack of experience in being that sort of dominant team. However, what I think we've seen in these games is the manager sort of being caught between two ideals and realising that I'm going to have to go out and attack these teams because I'm Rangers and they're going to give me the ball. It's fine to say you want to be pragmatic and all that sort of stuff. If the other team goes, here's the ball, on you go, you're fucked. So you can't really do anything about it. So I've been surprised at that, and I think he's trying to change to suit that. Then I go back to recruitment of manager and players. If you know what the issue is or what the demand is, and the demand is always, we can talk about positions of play or different philosophies or players from the league or whatever, and all those variables can change from club to club. The only constant with Rangers, or the only couple of constants with Rangers, are you need to play 3 games a week. So you have to be able to do that. That is a red line. If you've no experience of managing,
Might not be.
yeah, well, true. But if you've got no experience of that as a manager or a coach, then and a player, then you're probably up against it quite quickly. And I think we're maybe seeing that with Tua Romans, for example, who's never done that in his career at all, coming in and having to do these things. The manager said himself he had to play 3 games in a week and hurt himself. So that is a big change for people, and we just sort of ignore it. That is something that needs managed. And the other thing is, I don't care if you want a pragmatic manager who can organise a defence and can do this. You're going to have 65% of the ball. That is not going to change. You're going to have 65% of the ball. So in my logical head, I'm thinking we should probably hire managers and players who are used to playing with that amount of the ball, who can then minimise the risk there. Because bringing in players who have played for Rangers, have been Rangers fans, have known the league, that's fine. They still have to have that big step up in expectation and adapt to the fact that they're going to see so much more of the ball. And all these things take time. So I'm really surprised at the defensive side of it. I'm not so surprised at the other sides. And I'm not really surprised at how the transfer window has gone, because it seemed very evident early on that we had a plan, maybe. I don't know. But again, these are the things that are no surprise. You can't come out in January and say we're enacting this plan and it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And then the 2 things that you need, which is a new defence completely and wide creativity, you can't be sitting in with 2 weeks of the window in August and going, okay, well, we've not really dealt with those things, but we've signed a collection of centre mids. That's not a club that's a club that maybe has a plan, and the plan is completely unrealistic, whether it's getting priced out of players, whether it's bringing in players that are not the right quality, whether it's that. I don't think that we've been in with no plan, but for whatever reason, the plan hasn't worked out, and it's the same story again as last summer window and the one before that.
And the ones before that, yeah. I mean, the bigger picture stuff then, I mean, you mentioned there about, players who are good on the ball, can use that possession, that they will get, they will be given, and all the rest of it. We have signed players like that who simply psychologically, physically cannot do that in Scotland because you're just being eaten up. So we're always in this bind, and Celtic are too, that you need the physically, mentally strong players who can still use a football, and can do all of that. So that's tough. It's just purely from a recruitment, but it must be tough. There's intangibles there as well, that no software is going to necessarily produce for you. I mean, I was fascinated a couple of years ago. Well, that was last summer actually. Sorry, and you were involved. A few others online, a kind of general discussion about whether we're a truly special club or not, and therefore the rules don't really apply here, blah, blah, blah. And I think I kind of concluded as a bit of a cop-out, really. There's almost a kind of Schrodinger nature to this. You're absolutely right. Modern football will modernise, and teams will be easily play around us and know exactly what's going to happen because we're so very obvious and blunt, and that's not going to change. But this microcosm, and we do seem to exist in a microcosm, is still real. It's still reality within this club, and we are simply not able to act and plan and execute like clubs in normal land because of the mayhem that surrounds it. And I got a bit of stick when the new owners came in, and I think I'd written something about, well, I've been quoted as saying they will be the adults in the room, and you've mentioned about listening probably listened too much. I've been a bit surprised by that. I think what I actually says was you could assume that there would be adults in the room, because that's what I felt the previous board, because they were fan investors, were naturally inclined to do. And it does need a bit of leadership just to say, or just to ignore the noise and say, well, no, this is what we're doing, and we're going to kind of stay the course. That is so easier said than done. I guess my view, Adam, and I've been pretty consistent about this for a while, because of the nature of this club, because of the expectations, and it's a wee bit like, I guess, Manchester United in the 1980s as an example, who they spent money. It wasn't like Liverpool were blowing Manchester United out the water. Manchester United were spending money on players with good track records in the first division, knew the league, had won things, were good players. But a lot of the insiders at Old Trafford said they have no idea how hated they are by other clubs. Rangers, United, Juve, Bayern, there might be other clubs, play someone's cup final every single week. And as we have found, I've lucky enough to have lived through it, you get such a position of dominance that you've won the game before the game's taken place, right? Teams are beaten. But when they smell blood, as clearly they've been able to do for the last 10 years since we've come back up to the division, we just don't have players who are able to just kind of deal with that. Joe Rothwell, for example, Adam, must have ticked so many recruitment boxes as a box-to-box midfielder, good engine, good use of the ball, loved the shot, blah, blah, blah. Leeds are a fairly big club, championship winning team, etc., etc. Couldn't wait to get out of here because he just had no idea what this would be like. I've made this point a million times, and sorry for repeating, but it doesn't seem to get through. If we'd bought Matt O'Reilly when Celtic did, what, a 21-year-old from League One, and said, run the midfield, son, he would have crumbled. He's going to a club that have got, right, they obviously had a bit of disappointment the season before, but there's an infrastructure there, and they've got players around them with a lot of medals in their pockets. He was allowed to just adapt, and they sell him for £25 million. I've read this week, Yan Diamandi going to Real Madrid for Christ knows how much money, Adam. Another one that we missed out on. That poor boy would have had a nervous breakdown if he'd come to Rangers and we'd asked him to do what we would have ultimately asked him to do. So, whether it's the spine of the team on the pitch, Adam, whether it's a manager, whether it's in the boardroom, it's more than just ability. It is a personality. It is a kind of character that can carry the club, and a clear ability. So we signed Kamar Roof is probably the best example of someone that we've signed since returning to this league, where I've thought, oh, right, if he can stay fit, blah, blah, blah. But not that he could be a good player, but he is instantly the best forward in Scotland. Instantly. I don't think there have been many, that maybe McGregor when he came back, has got, the Celtic have as good a goalkeeper as that, probably not. Forget how long Steve Davis even took to just get back up to speed, and then he had that kind of season of his late career, the year that we won the title. It's hard to get those players. Whether we can afford them, I'm just not sure. And that means that the players I think we can afford, some have been irreparably bad, just unarguably poor choices. But I don't believe every one of them has, not even close to it. I believe there's a lot of Rangers players at the moment, a lot of Rangers players who've been here the last few years, who would have had fine Rangers careers, who would have flourished, who would have had brilliant times had they had a spine around them, that they're not the ones being asked to do everything, because they simply aren't able. Rangers teams who have won umpteen trophies have had loads of those players who are just good pros, who filled in, had, little ripples of form where they were the ones scoring goals or doing whatever, but it's fine. Butcher's here or Gascoigne's here, whatever it may be. And mate, I'll be honest, I don't know how you can build that house with those supports, those players, 2 or 3, maybe 4, I don't know, because without it, it will collapse in upon itself time and time and time again. I don't see how that changes without it, and I don't see how we can convince or afford or attract the players who are like, give us it. Give me that pressure every week, and for everyone else in that dressing room to say, oh, well, this is different. He's here. We're going to be fine. And I think that's the situation Rangers are in. And I don't see an obvious solution. And I'll be honest, I haven't for 10 years. We can talk about the league title winning season in isolation. There are a lot of issues around that, a lot of circumstances around that. But that's what Rangers continually have to face and solve if we're ever going to be back properly. And by back properly, obviously means winning titles.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the last show that we did last year, we said it does need to come with a Scottish core for sure, but they need to be good. Like it's not a cheerleader thing or someone that's going to be good for the squads. Like they have to be able to contribute. It's not enough to just be Scottish or understand Rangers. They have to be able to contribute. And I think the two names that we got to were Lewis Ferguson and Billy Gilmore. I think in the last episode that we did, in a kind of flippant way. Not that we should sign those players, but do you have a spare 40, 50 million to go and do that? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, because you then, even going back 10, 15 years ago, you were able to probably bring in some British players. If there weren't Scottish players, you were able to bring in some British players who were playing at Premier League level. And you think, okay, fine, they can come in and they can sort of fill that gap. The market is gone now for that as well. You're not getting any. You're not getting any of those players in as well. So I understand it. I think that's what I hoped that we spoke before. If you've got a well-drilled team, it can raise the standards of other players. If players fit the team that they're trying to play for, they can cover their deficiencies, all that sort of stuff. I had hoped for some of that. Maybe like a Ross McCrory, Dujon Sterling type thing. You think, okay, that makes right back not terrible. Defensively, again, shows that you can't really predict anything in Rangers land, but you obviously would lose a lot going forwards. But okay, that's fine. Plug that gap. Bringing in maybe some midfielders like a Conor Barron who can get about a bit and pass okay. Should never really be a first pick Rangers midfielder ever. But okay, those type of players coming in, I think, would supplement, but you still need the players in there who are going to be the first picks, who understand it all as well, and they're just not about. They just don't exist. And I think it's a very, very tricky thing. The only real way that you can do this, and no one has any appetite for it, and no one has any time, I guess, is the only real way that you can do it is to grow your own, really. However, I don't think the academy is particularly set up to do that as well. I don't think we're anywhere near as mature as a club to say, not even just the supporters, but inside the club to say, here's our 5 best players and we're going to play them. I don't think that works. That's not. That's
and how realistic is it to get 3 Barry Fergusons, which is really what you're talking about? Someone with that innate belief, and even then, a player who came into one of the best Rangers midfields I've ever seen, and of course felt a lot more secure. He was happy, being a dominant voice there, but it's easy to do that when you're a kid, but you're surrounded by genuinely kind of world class players. So it's.
But I think where you and I slightly disagree on it is that I don't believe we have to go and spend mega money on a player, because I have a belief that 10 million quid, for example, doesn't really get you a lot either nowadays, if I'm being honest. So I don't think there's a automatic number that you go above and we think, okay, wow, that guy's coming. I think people would be probably astounded at the players that they don't know about that will cost easily 10 to 15 million pounds. So I don't know if much really changes if you go further up the window there. What I do think it comes down to is good scouting. We talk about, this player can't settle in, or this player is good but can't really run, or this player hasn't played with the ball a lot. Those are scouting things. This player, I think that was said about Driesch on one of the interviews. One of the first things the journalist said was, he needs a bit of a cuddle or an arm around the shoulder every now and again. No, that is not what we're looking for right now. That is the last thing we're looking for right now. No. So those type of things, you're like, that's basic stuff. That's passing a check of, do you have the attitude? Do you have the character? Do you have the technical ability? Have you played in common environments? Have you got the quality to play for Rangers? I struggle with Nico Raskin level of player for Rangers right now. And I don't mean level of player, but I mean in terms of Nico Raskin's quality. So for me, arguing about whether Conor Barron or Cammy Devlin are one of the better players. I think this is rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic stuff. This is so far removed from what we need to be, or saying X was this window is better than the window last year. Better than absolutely terrible is not where I want Rangers to be, or worse than whatever. So I just think it does feel a little bit like that, and I think it does need to come down to you have to spend money, you have to be sure, and even then it is not a guarantee because of all those other factors that we mentioned. That for whatever reason we seem to fall on the wrong side of those margins. We seem to constantly bring in players who might be good. We seem to constantly bring in players who look good for their team, but when they come here, they're just not suited to what the demands are for Rangers. And I don't really mean the expectation wise as well, although that is a part of it. I just mean when you come here and you go from having 40, 50 touches of the ball to 100, have you done that before? Because if you haven't, it's a completely different ball game, literally.
Yeah, I don't know how far apart we are on that. I think fans are skewed just because of where we've been financially about what you get for £8 to £10 million.
Yeah.
£8 to £10 million probably gets you the guys who do chip in, who can be good complementary players. But this goes back to my point, Adam. I'm afraid they will fall on their arse if they're not supported by genuine, but just getting a spine of a team that said Rangers have got the best centre back in the country immediately. They got the best centre mid in the country, and they got the best goal scorer in the country. And great. So it's not all about me. I can thrive off that. Until that happens, and how that happens, it's a bind. It really is. As is everything. I mean, it's either revolution or nothing. Well, that's not going to happen. So where's the patience? Then you go, okay, if you can't get those players or enough of those players, what you need is what we've kind of had from 2018, which is a manager that has that personality, has that character, has that stature, that can maybe carry a team along. But I think it's fairly clear he won't come back here until everything's kind of perfect, which I'm afraid isn't part of the job, but that's not what management is about. So there's the bind there. Everything just seems kind of like a vicious circle at the moment. Just on the ownership again, and does this again still tell the same story? Parag Marat, I know he's kind of moving things around maybe to spend a bit more time on this kind of project, but he's obviously part of the group, and he does have experience of high level sport. He does have experience of being involved in a club in Leeds United who are doing fine in the hardest, the biggest league in the world, have traded well, I think it's fair to say, Adam, in a very, very competitive environment. But is there a danger that he's looked at that? He's looked at the general principles of sports management and trading from NFL. They've applied that to Leeds. It's worked fine. They're doing right. They had that initial disappointment when they went down, but they went back up and they went back up with bags of style and supplemented that and built on that. Well, this will work at Rangers. And again, it's just this inability. They haven't done the homework to find out what there just isn't necessarily going to work here. You've taken on something that is very, very unique. It's got a unique set of challenges, unique set of circumstances, pressure that you have no concept of at Ellen Road or in San Francisco. And therefore, well, why is this kind of not working? Is there a danger there that's what's happening, kind of plug and play of various different kind of playbooks?
Well, I can't really speak to how 49ers or anything do their recruitment or anything like that, but I don't know if they've really applied the same principles from Leeds. It doesn't look like they've applied any principles, if I'm being brutally honest. That's now 18 months plus 20 months since the news broke, I think, that we were in talks with them. I was surprised how unprepared we seemed for last year's summer transfer window.
Yeah, me too.
Because you'd had Kevin Thelwell in since March or April, I think it was. All this due diligence. I get it wasn't fully signed off, all that sort of stuff, but again, everybody's aware of what the need is, so you must have plans in place in the background that if this is signed off, here is what we want to do. And it really, really didn't feel like that at all. There was an element of let's wait until we get the manager in. I think Kevin Thelwell said himself, let's wait until we get the manager in, and then we'll start doing things in the middle of June. Alarm bells, big time at that point, for sure. And obviously that went the way it did. And again, coming to this summer, it doesn't really feel like there is a clear plan there. I was expecting a lot more in terms of communication. We seem to get we're going to increase the seats type thing. Okay, great. So yeah, I'm a bit surprised about that as well in terms of Marathi, because they're not stupid men. They're not just
Or
going to throw money
nefarious
at.
Men.
No,
They're,
no,
they're not, they're
or
not
not,
chancellors and
not at all.
are kind of maligning.
But it's like you don't need to be.
Involvement.
Still, damage is still happening, and just throwing money at it, I don't think really works. So I was expecting that there would be some. Why do you buy Rangers? You buy it for various reasons, but there must be a plan. There's this whole integration with Leeds and with the Red Bull data set up and all that sort of stuff. And it never really feels like there is a plan. Veered from Russell Martyn to Derek McInnes, which is polar opposite in every way possible. You got Danny Rule in the middle, who arguably was the best fit in terms of style of play with Leeds, Red Bull, all that sort of stuff, but just didn't have the strength of character, I don't think, or the experience to do the job. And then you've gone back the way again, because you want to identify more with Scottish culture and roots. Okay, that's great, but what was the plan when you decided to take over the club? Was it really to go from Russell Martyn to someone in the middle and then go back the way, or are you just reacting to how things have gone? Because that's only a year. That's not a long time. So that's the thing that really frustrates me about it.
But this goes back to what you said earlier at the show, and obviously predates the takeover. I don't believe there was no plan. I just think they thought their plan would work here, and and it hasn't, and they very quickly realised it hasn't, and I think they've been flailing about ever since, and moving between styles, managers, and again throwing. I mean, it's the Chermiti signing, the Miovski deal, kind of late on in the last window. It's like, oh right, shit. I don't. Maybe I'm giving people far too much credit, and of course things could be a lot better from a recruitment point of view. But I don't think they're sitting there with, oh, we forgot to put the very good filter on. We should have done that. Let's look at some very good players. Their idea, I think their assumptions about what would work here in terms of players were out of sync with the reality, and it was that maybe lack of looking under the bonnet. It's a unique club, and in a way, I kind of wish it wasn't, because we could then have a bit of breathing space just to do things in a kind of stepwise and kind of planned way. And that's how I read it. They've suddenly kind of realised, oh, this isn't working, and they've lost their moorings as well, just like everyone else. No one at this club at this minute in time seems fit for the job they do. They all seem a little out of depth. They seem like they're struggling a little bit, and that's obviously hugely concerning. But the games keep coming, unless you postpone one, obviously next week in the league. But at least we'll not get a kind of do or die cup match against a team that's in form and on the up, Adam.
Yes, that would be good, wouldn't it? So yeah, I think you're right. I think whatever they have decided to do hasn't been right, and I guess the eternal optimist in me hoped that was a year of lots and lots of learning, and they would try and resolve it. But to go back to the transfer window again, I can't. I don't see how this was the plan. I don't see how anybody looked at the squad and thought what we need are more squad players in positions that aren't priority positions to recruit in. It just doesn't make sense. Why are we, when we have overloaded with midfielders that nobody really thinks there's an absolute star in there, why do we then go and add another 3? And it doesn't allow us to then do other things in the transfer window in the positions that we needed. Why was it a good idea to have 8 or 9 centre midfielders on the books that then block us from bringing in wingers. We had 2 wingers, and one of them was Kasama, and one was Finlay Curtis at one point. 1 fullback, 2 centre halves that were either fit or not bombed out. Those are the things that I think don't make sense. I completely get, let's get our business done early in some of these positions, and then we're waiting for
some of the
players
supplementary guys.
Yeah, and okay, fair enough. Some of them were free transfers. Okay, I can sort of understand it, but it looks very much like we got priced out of a move for Kierto and decided to go for Dragojevic. It looks like we were told in January that Chukwani coming in was a one that they wanted to bring forwards to allow us to not make midfield signing or as many midfield signings this summer. So it just feels like they're not executing a plan, I think, or they're being caught up with players we like, players the manager likes, players that are available now that we can bring in. I just was expecting a bit more. I know what my demand or my expectation is to have the majority of the players there before they go away on their warm weather training camp, and I know that things don't always work in that way. But again, I come back to there's a whole wide world out there. I'm sure we could get to that at some point if we could. Whether we're then waiting to bring in the cherry on the cake in the month of August, then okay. But it sort of feels like we did things that we maybe didn't need to do that then blocked us from doing things we did.
So the reality of the situation hit them last year, and I think they've been knocked off course since. And I kind of agree with you, Adam. I think Danny Rule as a manager type is probably what we need, but older, more experienced, a bit more cachet and a bit more presence. That's probably that kind of ideal meeting point, and now we're swinging as we kind of have for the past ever really. We will always think they go from one kind of manager type to the other extreme. Nothing new under the sun. We don't get to pod much, Adam. This is why we do this. It could well be therapy this season, son. But always good to chat, and we'll speak soon.
Can't wait. Thank you.
Indeed. Who knows what the rest of the window's got, but if you need therapy and need to join our session, then we'll be back soon enough. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let's hope things take a turn for the better soon. Bye for now.